Hello and welcome to our next unit in the Christian Scriptures class. This one is going to be on other canonical witnesses. I wanted to send you a video again since I haven't done that for a little while. I wanted to do it outside at some point, but it's so windy that the tone quality will be terrible if I stayed outside. So I'm doing it in the car with this lovely church here in the background. It's an old Reformed church in Ridgefield, New Jersey, with an old cemetery behind it as well. It's one of the older places of worship around here. I also want to wish you a happy or meaningful Maundy Thursday, Holy Thursday. For those of you who go to churches that have a liturgical calendar, you will know that today is the day where people remember the Last Supper that Jesus shared with his disciples and his urgent praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he was eventually arrested. Tomorrow, of course, is Good Friday, and then I wish you a happy Easter for Sunday. So, other canonical witnesses. What do we mean by that? Well, in terms of biblical books, we are talking about the book of Hebrews, James, 1st and 2nd Peter, and Jude. Those are books that are probably a little bit less familiar to most people, except maybe for Hebrews. And they're also difficult to categorize. It was easy to tell a story of the early church by following Paul and all his writings, as we remember that Paul wrote 13 out of the 27 books in the New Testament, and that in the book of Acts, Paul is also taking a major role. So Paul is pretty dominant in the New Testament. And then we just finished the Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels, and the voices of Mark and Matthew and Luke, Acts, that also contribute towards a fairly good story of the early church. But interestingly, there are other voices in the New Testament and in the early church that also contributed towards the forming of what we now know as Christianity. Of course, we will still talk about that whole Johannine tradition. That will be the section after this one here. But now we will be dealing with those books in the New Testament that are really hard to categorize. The first thing is that all 5 of these books are probably pseudonymous. Now, what does that mean? Pseudonymous means that they are written under a different name. Or better yet, that we don't actually know who the author is. The author might come from a certain tradition within the church and uses the name of the leader of that tradition rather than mentioning their own name. In today's world, that would be a no-no, right? You're not supposed to plagiarize. You need to write what you write under your name and not use somebody else's name, or make somebody else's writing your own. But back then, it was a different story. If you wanted to have credibility with a certain group of people, it was good if you wrote your piece under the name of the leader of your tradition. As we will go through those books more in detail, we will talk about the authorship of each one of them still. We will see when we talk about 1st and 2nd Peter that maybe 1st Peter might have been written by Peter the Apostle, but that could also be not the case. We will discuss that more. Hebrews never mentions any kind of author. We don't know who wrote Hebrews. James, we will talk about the authorship, but it's quite unlikely that it would be James, the brother of Jesus, but we'll talk about that. And Jude is the same way. In traditional Bible scholarship, people thought that all these books are late and belong to a later tradition of the 2nd generation or even 3rd generation church. That's why they're often called the Catholic epistles. Catholic, of course, in this case, not meaning Roman Catholic, but more the universal church. But to lump them all together into a late tradition is probably not correct either. The best would be to just simply take those witnesses and take them for who they are, and hear different voices from the early church. We will talk about that more in detail when we talk about the letter of James, but this is a neat situation actually. We know so much that Paul preached that you cannot work your way into heaven, but that you are saved by grace through faith. And that was certainly an important message to his community, who was struggling with whether or not they need to be Jewish first before they can be Christian. And Paul's message was very much on target by saying, no, you don't have to do things, that Jesus has accomplished your salvation on the cross by dying on the cross, and therefore you are now free. But James brings another aspect to this, probably because Paul was misunderstood. James says, yeah, but your true faith shows in your actions. So he says that faith without works is dead. Paul says works alone will not make you saved. And James says, but faith alone will not work either. You have to show in your actions that you actually have faith. So it's wonderful that we have those voices, as small as they might be, that we have those voices in the New Testament as well. And so I look forward to going through those with you for the next 3 sessions. And now again, I wish you a meaningful Maundy Thursday and Good Friday and a happy Easter. Until next time.